In this video you will learn how to use Sign In with Apple in your IONIC Angular application in combination with Supabase. What's up Cybernics, and welcome back to a new IONIC Angular tutorial in combination with Supabase. So today we will try and integrate Sign In with Apple, which has become very popular in really a lot of applications, into our application. And most of this is really configuration inside your iOS developer portal, so you need to be enrolled in that developer program in order to make this work. We need to obtain an app ID, a service ID, a key, a secret key, and put into Supabase different values and in our application just a tiny bit. And then finally we're gonna host our IONIC Angular application on Netlify because this requires a safe environment. This video was also made to celebrate the Super Launch Week next week. I think it is Super Launch Week number 6. There's great content coming out, and this is part of the new content as well. So go follow the Supabase Launch Week. There are always super interesting new features, new tutorials, news, really a lot of updates about Supabase that you should follow along. And also, of course, this video is sponsored by Supabase, which is the open source alternative to Firebase, and I've used Supabase in really a lot of my projects, including the banana project. But without further ado, let's dive into the tutorial. Link to the code right below this video so you can follow everything that we do, and it's also the written version. And of course, check out Supabase and create your free account to get started. All right, let's start the fun by creating a Supabase project. So you can create an account, just sign in with GitHub and click new project in your organization. So I'm gonna call this Apple Auth project. Really great name. Then I'm gonna copy this password. I'm just gonna leave everything for to the defaults for now. However, once this is done, what was that? That was a little error. Anyway, this is setting up my project now. So this runs for like a minute or something. Can we go to the authentication already? Are we allowed to do that? It's not yet set up. Well, anyway, we can already start with Apple because we need like 80% of what you need for sign in with Apple actually happens on the Apple side. So go log in. You need to be enrolled in their developer program. I think it's $100 per year, or it was actually in the past. And then we can go to identifiers and create a new app ID. So a new app ID is always required when you want to submit a native application to iOS or Android. Of course, in this case, it's only to iOS because we're here on Apple. But you're gonna have some kind of identifier. So I'm gonna call this Supabase video app. And I'm gonna use com.devdectic.supabase video. We probably need this in the future. Then we can scroll down here and find sign in with Apple. Just hit the check mark. That's everything. We don't need to edit it right now. And then click continue and register your app ID. Now we do the same again, but this time we do a service ID. This is always required if you want to use sign in with Apple on the web. So go ahead. I'm gonna use I'm gonna call this service.whatever, and I'm gonna make a note of this because this will be important. I'm just gonna add it here and call this Supabase Apple video, whatever, doesn't really matter. I don't think this shows up anywhere. Gonna hit continue, gonna register this service ID, and now, okay, how did I call it? Supabase Apple video, right? Yeah, that's the one. I used this a few times before. Now we need to go into that service. In case you don't see it, make sure you filter by service ID. Go into this, enable sign in with Apple and hit configure, and now it gets interesting. So first of all, we now need to select our app. This is we created the Supabase video one. We need that one, and now we need to register website URLs. We need to register the domain of our project and also the return URL. So how do we actually get this for our website? Well, for the return URL, we can now head over to our Supabase project, dive into the provider section and enable the Apple provider. And here we're gonna find our redirect URL. So we can just copy this over and put it in here. This is the URL that Apple will send the user back to after a successful or failed authentication or sign in with Apple. But now we also need to add our domain, and this is a bit more complicated. If you do have a domain, you can just put it in here if you know where you host your web app. If you don't have one, I'm just gonna use this. I actually made just a manual deploy here, and I'm gonna use this right here. In fact, we don't need HTTP, we just need this part. So here will be, or this will be my application. I hope this works. We're gonna later deploy to Netlify, but again, you could use any kind of other hosting. All right, hit next. Everything should be fine. Done. Continue, and then hit save. Okay, that's a good step. So we made an app ID and we made a service ID, and now we do a key. So let's go to keys, hit add. I'm gonna call this Supabase video key, just to remember what it was. We want to enable sign in with Apple. We're gonna hit configure, and we're gonna use our Supabase. Oh no, I get confused. I think it was this, right? Supabase video. Oh, let's hope so. Supabase video key. Okay, we got this. Let's hit continue. Let's register this key. And now it's important. We first of all gonna download the file. So we will need this file pretty soon to do some fancy stuff. We also want to note the key ID. So I'm gonna put this into my file here as well. There we go. Just to make a little note, and then I think at this point we are done with Apple. Isn't that great news? I think most of you will be happy that we're done with Apple now. However, we see in here that we need to configure the service ID and the secret key. Now, the service ID, we actually got that one. This is the first one, the service we registered at Apple. For the secret key, we need to be a bit, well, kind of creative. The problem is, no, I don't want to do this right now. Oh, come on. Everything was fine. Why did you mess this up? Oh, man. I hate this. Now, anyway, what we need to do is we need to create a little script. So let's create a new file. We call this secret gen.rb. I don't know why. Whenever I do a new file, it's not working. This is something that's mildly annoying me. I don't know why. And I'm gonna read this over because I found this here on the Supabase documentation. So they also outline all the steps for the Apple ID. We got the Apple ID, we got the service ID, we even got our callback URL. We configured the service ID with domain and subdomain and return URL. And now it's about generating the client secret. And for that, we need the file we just downloaded and this little script. So if you haven't installed Ruby, I think on a Mac usually, isn't that installed automatically? But anyway, this is the script you need to pass in. You can find it linked below as well. So key file, that's gonna be just this one here. So I put this next to my key that I downloaded. I'm gonna put this in here. My team ID, what is my team ID? My team ID is usually up here. Can I select this? Nice, I can. This is my team ID. My client ID, the service you created. Okay, this is the this one here. And then we got the key ID. Well, that's pretty much in the name of the key, but also I made a note, right? Yeah, that's in the name anyway. Okay, putting it in here as well. And now we just need to run that file. How do we call this with Ruby? We can call it exactly like this. Ruby secret gen RB, and we're gonna output it into client secret.txt, and we get that. So copy this over, move back to Supabase, put it in here, and hit save. And with that, we have taken probably 80% of the tasks that we need to do in order to configure sign in with Apple using Supabase. Now let me get my window back here, and then we can continue. So this is, I don't think we actually need this again. We use this. Okay, cool. So now we can also start our Ionic application just like this. Bring up a new Ionic application and then install the Supabase JS package. On top of that, we might want to do one more thing in our Supabase project. So right now we don't have any table or any other stuff in here. So let's run a little query. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a users table. Usually we do this because you don't have access to the internal authentication table and the information in there. So we're going to create a users table. Can we zoom in to make this a bit bigger for you? Maybe we can. I'm going to create the users table. And then we're also going to create a new function here. So this will be triggered, create trigger on authenticated user created, which means the procedure or the function here will run when we have a new authenticated user added to the internal auth table. And at that point, we're going to handle this. We're going to insert in our users table ID, email, and name. And this is quite important because, okay, we can get the ID and the email of the user again. However, with sign in with Apple, you only get the metadata, like the full name, once when the user uses the service the first time. So you should be really careful that you grab all the information that is inside the sign in with Apple token or information that you get back after a sign up and extract whatever you need into your own table. If you don't do this, you won't get that information if the user signs in with Apple again in the future. There's a limitation I found about this. So let's hit run, success, no rows returned. That's exactly what we want to see. But we should have our users table here, which is empty. And if you go to database, we can at this point even see our trigger. So here it is, in case you messed up something. So you can remove the table and you can also delete the trigger again, which is pretty good because in the past I haven't found this. Also, there's no logs about the different things in here. So Supabase is really making a lot of progress lately. And that's also why we celebrate the next launch week. Okay, we now need to connect our Supabase project to our Ionic application. We do this best inside the environment. So usually I do it like this. I'm gonna put in a Supabase URL and a Supabase key. You can grab both of this on Supabase, going to project settings, API. Up here is the project URL. Whoops, going there. And then we got the anonymous key. Don't use the service key in your front end project. So this anonymous key is really safe to use if you have the right role level security enabled for your tables. We're not talking about that today. We did this before. But the service role can pretty much do everything on the database, even if you have role level security. So this key has the ability to bypass role level security. So don't use it in your front end project. I highly recommend you don't do that. Okay, I'm also gonna copy this environment to prod because we're gonna do prod build pretty soon. I'm gonna set production to true, and then we go. On top of that, we now just need to do a few things. So let's go to our app routing. Because I'm hosting that page, I'm just gonna make this available at the just slash. Otherwise, I would have to use like the netlify toml file and redirects and yada yada. And you don't need to care about this. I just want to make sure that this is the first page we display. And then we can go into our home page, TS and HTML, and get started. So on our home page, we're going to keep track of the user using a behavior subject of the type user. Oh, come on. No auto import. Come on. This is from... Oh, I probably haven't installed the Supabase package, right? There we go. npm install Supabase JS. And once I got this, I think I'm gonna be able to, yeah, almost, almost. Going one more try. There we go. Now we got that user. Target analysis to power user. Well, how is this possible? Like, I have the exact same code. I ran this before and it was no problem to have null in here. How do we make this like this? We could probably do it like this. Not the cleanest solution, but it should work. Okay, private Supabase. We're gonna create our connection to Supabase using the Supabase client, and then within the constructor we Supabase. That's how you call it, right? Yeah, but it's valid. You don't have to make this red. Just if the value is never red. Really, this is really confusing me. So we're gonna set this to create client and then passing in our environment dot the URL and environment dot Supabase key. Did you get that import right? No, you don't use it from prod, we just use it from environment, and create client should definitely come from the Supabase JS package and not the node modules folder. What is wrong with you today, Visual Studio? Just chill. Damn. Anyway, now we can create two functions. Sign in with Apple. No, I'm written too much React lately, right? Then this is really, this is interesting because this is just one line. Await this dot Supabase accessing the authentication package, and then we got the different functions: sign in with OAuth, OTP, password, single sign on, and this time we're using OAuth. And the credentials in here, what we need to pass is just the provider name. So in our case, the provider name is Apple. We can check this out, sign in with OAuth credentials. We could have an options with redirect, but we actually don't need to. And we can have different scopes, which you can pass to OAuth. But we're just gonna keep this to the defaults. Then we need a second function. I'm just gonna copy this. I'm gonna call this sign out. And what we're gonna do in here is, guess what? Sign out. Also, this has no data, this is just an error. And in general, we will handle the whole authentication state by using an on-auth state change listener. So we can use this .supabase.auth.on authentication state change. And we do get back a callback with event and session. And we're just gonna lock out those values. Actually, why did you, I don't know. Let's just put the event in here and the session as well. And what we can do is simply say if the event is equal to signed in, or event equals to token refreshed. Then we're going to set our this.user next using the information from the session. So the event is really just the string, and the session contains the access token, expires, provider, whatever, and the actual user object. So in the else case, I'm just going to say this.user.next. I'm gonna set this to null. Now, why do I code out all these things without doing a test live? Well, the problem is we need HTTPS to make sign in with Apple work. And then we also supplied the callback URLs and the URL to Apple. So this stuff really just works in the right environment. You can probably make this work by generating a certificate for localhost and having local HTTPS, but I'm not completely sure about if you will get the actual result back. However, we now got this in place, and you gotta trust me on this. I'm gonna clean up this view a bit, removing this. Let's do color success. So we got a nice Supabase green, Supabase plus Ionic. We can run this part locally at least. So now we're gonna add a button. Let's do this. Let's, for fun, do a little Ionic serve. So we're gonna show this button only if the user is equal to null. Only in that case, we're gonna display our sign in with Apple button. And in the other case, then the user is actually not null. So this is how it would look like. We would have that button, we could trigger it. And I think actually Oh yeah, this will actually already trigger the Apple sign-in. The only thing is we will not get back to our local application, but we see the beginning works. That is a good start, good starting point. And we're gonna add a little card. So if we do have a user, we're gonna show the user. And oh, you got a problem. Full comes from an index, so it must be accessed with full name. Interesting. You'll like it more like this. Object is possibly undefined. Which one? This one? How is it possible that one day you do something and the next day it's not working anymore? This is, I love packages. Anyway, you need to trust me a bit on this. We're gonna see the logs from the object in a second. But what we do see is that user will have a metadata object, an app metadata, and the email is in general in the Supabase user object. And then we're also gonna display our sign out button if we do have that information. So how do we test this out? As I said, it's not working locally. So I'm just gonna run IONIC build. This will run a production build, ng run app build, and ng build is currently always taking the production build when you do a build. So make sure your production environment is set up with the right information as well. Now, this is done. And if this is done, I can probably just open my folder. I can't. Oh, I already got this open in another view. So here we go. Here is the www folder, and this can easily be put into our hosting. So I'm going to go to deploys. If you don't have an application, you could also add a new site and start or deploy manually. But since I used this URL already, we're going to go to deploys. And here we can just drag and drop our www folder into this. Then it's deploying. No, it's actually uploading. It's not yet deploying. No, it is deploying. No, it's actually published. Okay, this is gonna be interesting. So this should be our application. I'm gonna hit sign in with Apple. We see some errors, but that's not really a problem. That's a problem of Apple. I'm gonna sign in with Apple. Create an account for Supabase Apple Video. Okay, so here what is this? The ID Supabase Apple Video. Is this the app identifier or is it this Supabase Apple Video? Okay, it's the name of the service. Interesting. So note that the name of the service will show up here. I'm gonna hide my email actually. I'm gonna click continue. I'm gonna remove this, and then it brings me back to localhost. That is interesting. I assume I do have an idea what went wrong. But first, let's check our table editor in the database and see if a user was added. Yes, a user was in fact added. That's interesting with the email, and the name was extracted from the user as well. We do get back to localhost. I think I had this during testing once. So I assume that my page here, my Zingy fellow D, I have a little problem with the version. If I do sign in with Apple again now, let's see what happens. I'm gonna select this. Now it says only this dialog. This comes up if you already signed in before. Let's check. It's still bringing me back to localhost. Actually, oh, now I know what's wrong. Oh, that's actually good. We forgot something. So what we need as well is to go to authentication, URL configuration, and configure the base URL of our project. So let me grab this, because right now it's always bringing us back to this URL, but it should bring us back to my Netlify app. And this should be the domain of whatever project you're using. So let's do another try. I'm actually gonna try and reset, because this will happen to you as well during testing. And then you end up with a user here and there, and I wanna do this again. So we delete the row to clean up our table. We remove the user from the authentication tab so we can register him or her again. The only problem we do have right now is that we used Apple Sign In now for this service already. And to reset this, you can go on your Mac to your system preferences and to your Apple ID. then click on password and security. And from here, you can dive into a list. I don't know why this is so slow. To apps using Apple ID. And once you click edit here, you can actually reset this for specific services. So in this list, I should be able to now find Supabase QRS Supabase video app. There we go. I'm gonna stop using my Apple ID, and you can pretty much leave this open for testing in the future, because you do want to reset this every now and then. Okay, let's do another test. Sign in with Apple. Opens Apple. Select my ID. Go. Again, we see the dialog that only comes up during the first time. I could actually also Simonics. Let's try this. I never changed my name here. This is going to be interesting. Hide my email. It takes time, and it returns to our application, and here we go. We got the signed in event, and we also got the token information, yada yada yada. We got the user, app metadata provider Apple, the funny email relay I used, identities, I don't know, and the user metadata with my full name. Nice. And if I go back to Supabase, will I have the same name here in the table? Yes, that's so funny. So we were able to grab the name from Apple using the procedure we created for our database in the beginning. So we do have the user now, we do have the entry in our users table, and we are signed in here with our email and our name. I can also refresh this, and because Supabase and the tokens we're using, I will continue with my session. So now I'm signed in. There is an open problem with native applications. So if I would deploy my IONIC application with capacitor to a device, I could still trigger this. It would open the browser and I could sign in. However, that is not really the native Apple sign-in dialog. The native Apple, oh thanks, that was an interesting sound. The native Apple sign-in dialog looks a tiny bit different, and it just opens up from the bottom. And there's a great capacitor plugin that you can use, capacitor Apple sign-in plugin. This works great. It even works on the web, and it returns a response with an identity token and an access token. This is usually pretty easy to implement. So going from here to there, it would take like 2 more minutes. However, the problem is that we have this open issue. It was actually about Flutter. So I want to sign in provider. And the problem is that in those cases, you need to supply this general OpenID connect token from a login flow to Supabase. There was a function for this in the past. It got removed from both the Flutter and the JavaScript v2 package. So I'm watching this issue or anything else. This was actually a very recent comment that they're working on making this, implementing this again, because they don't have a great flow and they want to come up with something serious. So until then, we only really have this information. We could probably send some kind of token information from the web to our app with an URL scheme and then set the session. However, I recommend we just give the Supabase team a bit more time to implement this. Where is it gone now? A bit more time to implement this, and then they will come up, I'm pretty sure, with a function where we can just pass in an identity token and an access token from some kind of OAuth flow, and then we will be signed in with Supabase. So anyway, sign in with Apple, working on the web as we've seen, and I'm sure very, very soon it will also work with a capacitor on a native device. And if you got any questions, as always, let me know in the comments. Alright, and that's it for today's tutorial. I hope you enjoyed this quick introduction to sign in with Apple. Make sure you also celebrate the super launch week next week, and stay subscribed to the channel for more IONIC, React, Angular, SwellKit, Flutter, everything videos coming in the next time. I hope you enjoyed this, and I will catch you inside the next video. So until then, happy coding, Simon.